Today's lesson is Kings, Queens, and Jacks, how court cards came to be. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be playing cards, or playing pukapai, as you call them here in Taiwan. To us, it's just cards, playing cards. And, of course, if you have some cards, you have a deck of cards. That's the measure word we use for them, a deck of cards, which has 52 cards, and then it will have a couple of jokers in there. But today, specifically, we're talking about the court cards, which are also referred to as the face cards, the cards that have pictures of people, which are people in the royal court, the jacks, the queens, and the kings.
Exactly right. Of course, the other cards would be number cards, ace up to 10. Those are the cards, of course, with lower values in most games, or the way you count in any card game you play. But the jacks, the kings, the queens, the face cards, these are the ones that we think of as being the most powerful, the highest value cards. And yeah, that's a very good point. We play cards in English. We don't play poker. Poker is one card game, but of course we don't always play that game. So generally we would say, I like to play cards. What card game do you play? Oh, I play poker. I play blackjack. I play bridge. These are the different games. But they will all use the same cards. And interestingly, all of those cards, or most of those cards, no matter where you buy them in the world, they all kind of look the same. Now, why is that? What is the explanation? What is the history? Let's get into it. Kings, Queens, and Jacks. How court cards came to be. If you've ever played cards, you're likely somewhat familiar with the face cards, also known as court cards, the kings, queens, and jacks. No matter what country they're produced in, face cards look similar. But why is this so?
Okay, so again, we're talking about face cards in today's lesson. We're also referring to them as court cards. Remember, that's the pictures of what look like princes and queens and kings, although the princes are called jacks.
That's right.
So be aware of that. Don't say the prince of spades or whatever. That's pretty weird. No one ever says that. But in any case, if you've ever played cards, you're likely somewhat familiar with the face cards, also known as court cards, the kings, queens, and jacks. Okay, before this lesson, I had not really heard the term court cards before.
Me neither.
We've always used the term face cards, which are the cards that basically have faces on them or pictures of people, again, the jacks, the queens, and the kings. But have you ever wondered where these cards have come from?
Very, very interesting. It says no matter what country they're produced in, face cards look similar. But why is this so? So that's the question we're asking and the question we're going to answer through our article. But it says no matter what country they're produced in. It doesn't matter what country. So in all countries that they're made, basically, face cards look similar. So the question is why? So yeah, cards made in America or Britain or Australia or even countries where they don't speak English, they might have different letters on the cards. I remember from being a kid, the king in a French card deck is the R, le roi, and the queen, I don't know actually how they did that one, because it's la reine, which also starts with a R, but I do remember jacks were valet, so it was a V instead of a J, but the actual picture on the card, and I think we can all sort of picture these very elaborate drawings of princes and jacks and queens and kings, they all kind of look the same. So, let's find out why that is. An explanation of face card designs must start with the origin of playing cards. While their precise source is a bit murky, it's believed that they originated in Asia, possibly in China, India, or Persia, sometime before AD 1000. The composition and design of playing card decks has since varied with time and place, but even the earliest cards had many characteristics in common with today's cards. For example, early playing card decks had both numbered cards and court cards and were divided into different suits. Over time, playing cards made their way from Asia to Europe, likely through trade routes.
大家好，我们直接看到第二部分的形容词 precise， 它的意思是确切的、准确的或是精准的。举例来说 Please provide a more precise meeting time to ensure I don't miss it. 请提供更明确的会议时间，以确保我不会错过。或者 The mathematician used precise calculations to solve the complex problem. 那位数学家运用精确的计算来解开这道复杂的题目。再来看到形容词 murky， 表示不清楚的、不明朗的或是肮脏的。例如 The facts surrounding the crime were murky, so the police decided to investigate further. 这起犯罪的相关事证不明确，所以警方决定进一步调查。或是 The reporter investigated the murky world of corporate corruption. 那名记者调查企业贪腐的阴暗面。继续看到名词 composition， 它的意思是构成、组成、作曲或是作文。例如 This plastic has a special composition that makes it hard as steel. 这个塑胶具有特殊的成分，使其像钢铁一样坚硬。也可以说 Our teacher asked us to write a composition about the importance of holidays. 我们的老师要求我们写一篇关于假期重要性的文章。后面介绍名词 characteristic， 表示特征或是特色。我们可以说 Rabbits have a number of characteristics that make them good pets. 兔子有许多特性，使它们成为很好的宠物。又或者说 This apartment has all the characteristics I'm looking for. 这栋公寓具有我正在寻找的所有特色。另外补充这个字也可以当形容词使用，意思是特有的或是典型的，像是This instrument gets its characteristic sound from its unusual design. 这项乐器因其独特的设计而有特别的声音。又或者是 Hector's punctuality is characteristic of his disciplined lifestyle. Hector 的准时是他有纪律生活方式的典型特征。接着看到 route 这个单字，它是名词，意思是路线或是航线。例如 Due to road construction, the delivery truck had to change its route. 因为道路在施工，那辆送货车不得不改变路线。又或者说 The parade route passes by City Hall. 这条游行路线会经过市政府。
Okay, let's move on now to the second part of our lesson for today, and we're going to try to explain why these face cards all look so familiar, or at least why they look similar to each other. And of course, yes, playing cards look the same pretty much all over the world. When you look at those face cards, Mike, do you think those kings and queens are Western people, or are they Africans, are they Chinese? What nationality do you think they are?
Interesting. I guess because they're so elaborate, it always made me think of the French court for some reason. But yeah, I don't really know. I wouldn't really put them from anywhere, but that's a very good question.
An explanation of face card designs must start with the origin of playing cards. Okay, so if you want to know where these designs came from for the face cards, well, to have this explanation, you need to talk about the origin of playing cards in general. Where did these cards actually come from? An explanation, of course, is the process of giving someone information so that they can understand something, and the verb is to explain. I don't understand what you said. Can you explain this? And that's basically what Mike and I are doing now. We're giving you an explanation of today's lesson.
All right, so let's see how this can all be explained. While their precise source is a bit murky, it's believed that they, that's cards, playing cards, originated in Asia, possibly in China, India, or Persia, sometime before AD 1000. Or 1000 AD, as some people would say. Well, that doesn't give us a lot of information because, yes, their precise source is a bit murky, clearly. When we talk about being precise, we talk about being very careful or very accurate. All right, so if we say their precise source is a bit murky, exactly where they came from. So the source is where something came from, and being precise is being very exact, being careful, being very, very accurate. Not saying, oh, about this or around that. I will be at your house at 10:17 precisely. Exactly 10:17. If you want to not miss your plane or train or bus, you should be on that bus at the precise time, or even before the precise time, the exact time it is supposed to leave. So here, though, the information, the source, the origin is not precise. It's a bit murky. Ugh. If something is murky, it's kind of hard to see through. If you think of a river or a lake with a lot of mud in the water and you try to put your head underwater, it's not like an ocean that's nice and clear. It's not like a swimming pool that's nice and clear. It's very hard hard to see because the water is filled with dirt and mud and silt, and it's basically making it very hard to see through. So that's what we would mean by murky. Also, the light in the evening time or at night, we could also say it was too murky to see the person. I couldn't exactly make out the details of their face. If information is murky, it's not very clear. It's not easily understood. We don't have a lot of the facts, maybe. When we hear about something, oh, there was an explosion at a town in Nigeria. Well, what happened? I don't know. Who was hurt? I don't know. How many people? I don't. Details are murky. It will all become clear later. So the information that we know about where playing cards came from is not very clear. It's believed that they originated or came from Asia, possibly in China, India, or Persia. That shows you how murky it is. We don't even know which country, and these are big countries, China, India, and Persia, with a long history. So we really don't know if we're kind of just taking a very general guess like that. And the time, around AD 1000 or maybe before, but again, dating it is very murky.
And the composition and design of playing card decks has since varied with time and place, but even the earliest cards had many characteristics in common with today's cards. So again, when you have a group of cards together, it is a deck of cards. And, of course, these decks have been different over time. They have varied with time and place. So maybe in Persia, they look different from the cards that they had in India. But they still were very similar, but they varied in appearance. And we've got the composition of the cards, which refers to what the cards contained, what sort of cards there were. As we said, the number cards, the face cards, and maybe we're talking about different kinds of suits and the colors. Yeah, these things varied from place to place.
Exactly right. But even the earliest cards had many characteristics in common with today's cards. So the design, the makeup, the shape of them, it's varied with time. It's changed over time and over the place where the cards were made. But if we find some of these really, really old collections of them, even the earliest cards had many characteristics in common with today's cards. So a characteristic is detail about something that helps to identify it. You know your friends' faces by the characteristics of their faces, the shape of their eyes and nose and the color of their hair. I might be able to recognize a person's voice by the characteristics of that voice. Oh, Roger has a very deep voice, and my other friend has a very high voice, or something like that. So these are the interesting identifying details of something that allow you to place it or categorize it or recognize it. So these old cards had many of these details in common with today's cards. So if I showed you a deck of playing cards from 800 years ago used in medieval times, they would have many things that are very similar or even exactly the same as a deck of cards I bought just the other day from a store made just last year or something. They look very similar in many details.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those similarities between the old cards and the new cards. For example, early playing card decks had both numbered cards and court cards and were divided into different suits. Okay, so if you play cards today, you're aware of the numbered cards and the face cards, but also you need to know about the different suits, which are specifically spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. Okay, so they had different suits back then, and probably given those two different colors, red and black.
Very interesting. So that is already one big similarity. Over time, playing cards made their way from Asia to Europe, likely through trade routes. Okay, like a lot of things that developed in either China, India, or Persia, today's sort of central Middle East, Iran, as Roger explained. Many of those things moved west from Asia to Europe along the Silk routes. So they made their way. They kind of traveled, they journeyed, they found their way from one place to another, not through a planned thing, right? Playing cards weren't like, we are going to conquer the world. But as people traveled around, they brought their culture and their food and their things with them. A lot of people say that's how noodles ended up in Italy, right? They were kind of brought from China along these trade routes, the Silk Road, things like that, from east to west through these trade routes. A route is basically a way of going from somewhere to another place, a sort of commonly traveled route, a commonly traveled path. You might take the same route to work every day. You catch the same bus, which goes down the same road, then and you transfer to the same subway, the same MRT, and you kind of do that way. Or you might change your route. You might say, oh, today I'm going to go along the river on my bike, or something like that. I'm going to go in a different way. Trade routes, meaning very common places that trade travels along. So today's trade routes might travel through the Suez Canal, down through the Persian Gulf, around through the Straits of Malacca to Indonesia and Singapore, and ultimately to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan. That is a very common route for big container ships to take these days. All right, let's take a look at the third part of our article, and then we'll be back to chat about it. The designs of modern cards date back to 15th century France as part of the French suit system that gave us hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. During the 15th century, French suit symbols became the standard in Europe as they were more easily stenciled. Thus, they were faster and cheaper to produce than their earlier counterparts.
第三部分介绍动词 stencil， 指的是用模板印刷或是用蜡纸印。举例来说 ，The artist stenciled his signature on every piece of artwork。这位艺术家用模板在每件作品上印上了自己的签名。又或者说 ，We decided to stencil the company's logo on the office doors。我们决定用模板在办公室的门上印上公司的标志。最后看到 counterpart 这个单字，它是名词。表示相对应者或是作用相同者。我们可以说 The salesman in New York called his counterpart in Los Angeles to set up a meeting. 那位纽约的业务打电话给在洛杉矶的业务，安排了一次会议。也可以说 Do you think men are often paid more than their female counterparts? 你认为男性的薪水往往比女性高吗
Okay, let's chat about the modern version of playing cards here. The designs of modern cards date back to 15th century France as part of the French suit system that gave us hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. Okay, so here we've got the phrase to date back to, which just refers to when these things started. Modern cards date back to 15th century France, which would be the 1400s there. And this was part of the French suit system. This is, I guess, developed by the French here, and they gave us these suits. They had suits before, but maybe the French sort of refined the suits and gave us the final version of the suits that we use now, which again include hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. My understanding is that spades are the highest rank of the suits, followed by hearts, diamonds, and then clubs.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the suits had different values. But yeah, sometimes in games, I guess they have to arrange them that way. So clearly that system has been around for a very long time. And then it says during the 15th century, so this is the 1400s, French suit symbols, the symbols that we think of being up in the corner, that heart shape, the diamond shape, the sort of elongated square shape for the diamonds, and of course the clubs and the spades, these became the standard in Europe as they were more easily stenciled. It's a logical, very practical reason to have something become a standard. It's just easier to print or it's easier to stencil. Yes, it would definitely make sense. If you had a very elaborate design for some of these suits, it would probably cost a lot more money and be a lot more artistically difficult to reproduce in large amounts. So you used a stencil. A stencil is kind of like a simple form of early printing. You take a piece of card, you cut out a shape in that card, and then you use ink to sort of print through the missing area, through the area that you've cut through. If anyone's done any silk screening or printing or things like that, this is the basic idea. Or if you think of children using a special form for something so they can draw a more complicated shape just by following the outside edges of this little space, that would be the stencil. They're stenciling that instead of drawing it freehand or something like that. So they're more easily stenciled, they're more easily printed and reproduced with these nice, simple, yet distinct designs that the French came up with. Thus, or because of that, they were faster and cheaper to produce than their earlier counterparts. And of course, they all came out looking exactly the same, leading to less confusion and possibly arguments among some of the people using these cards later on. If everyone's playing with the same material, there'll be fewer problems with disagreements. So they were easier and cheaper to produce than their earlier counterparts. A counterpart is basically something very, very similar, maybe in competition with you. If you're applying for a job, you want to be selected over your counterparts that are also applying. But basically, it's someone doing or performing or inhabiting the same space or the same role as you.
Right, okay. So again, we've got counterparts nowadays in terms of, say, world leaders. You've got the President of the United States, and then you've got maybe this person meeting with his counterparts in other parts of the world for specific meetings, like the Prime Minister of the UK or whatever. Those are all the counterparts of those world leaders. And indeed, this made it possible for those cards to be copied and spread around the world, and the rest is history. Now we have all these different kinds of cards in the world, and they all are pretty much standard. A deck of cards in Taiwan is going to be the same kind of deck of cards that you find in Russia or South Africa or wherever. Okay, we're at the end of our lesson for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到，人头牌设计的解释必须从纸牌的起源开始。尽管它们确切的来源有点模糊不清，但据信它们源自于亚洲。好，文中是用 precise 来形容确切的。那我们来学一下它的字首字根。CID 和 CIS 这两个字根，它有 cut 或者是 kill 的语义，表示砍、切、割或者是杀等等。在 precise 这个字当中，字首 PRE 表示事先，那么 CISE 表示删减。同学们可以试着联想，把不要的、不相关的、不重要的东西，我们事先就全部都把它删掉、砍掉，那么剩下的就会是确切的、准确的东西。所以 precise 是用来形容确切的、准确的或是精确的。好，那这边也补充两个有相同字根的单字。第一个是 incise， 字首 in 它表示在什么之中，那么 CISE 表示切割。从字首字根来看，就是切进某个东西里面，所以 incise 它表示切入、切开或者是雕刻的意思。第二个补充的是 concise， 这个字首它表示完全有强调的语义。CISE 表示切除，完全切除就表示干净利落。我们用这样的方式去联想到 concise， 它有简明的、简洁的意思。好，那么课文第三部分提到说，在15世纪，法国花色符号成为欧洲的标准，因为他们更容易用模板印刷，比起早期同类的纸牌，他们制作起来更快速，而且更便宜。文中是用 their earlier counterparts 来表达早期同类的纸牌。那这个名词 counterpart 指的就是相对应者、相对应的人事物。那这个单字就常常用来指跟前面叙述相对应的人或是事物。假设在前面的叙述有提到某部电影的女主角，那么 her male counterpart 就是相对应的男性，那就是男主角咯。好，那这边顺便补充一下这个字首 counter， 或者是还有一个字首 CONTRA， 它们会带有相反的，或者是与什么相对的、对应的或是复制的等等的语义。那我们来看几个带有这一类字首的单字。第一个是 counteract， 它的字首 counter 有相反对立的意思， act 表示行动作用，那对立的行动应该可以联想到 counteract， 它有抵消对抗的意思。第二个补充的是 counterclockwise， clock 是时钟，那么 wise 副词字尾它是表达以什么什么方式，合在一起 clockwise 就表示顺时针方向的。那我们接着在 clockwise 前面加上字首 counter 表示相反的，那顺时针的相反就是逆时针嘛，所以 counterclockwise 就是表达逆时针方向的。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Explanation. Professor Bowman's explanation made everything much clearer. Precise. Please let me know the precise part of the park in which you want to meet. Composition. Flour, sugar, and eggs are included in the composition of most cakes. Characteristic. One characteristic of a good teacher is patience. Route. The bus driver followed the usual route through the city. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.